The sun hung low over the semi-urban town, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Mud brick homes, worn by decades of sun and rain, leaned unsteadily beside unfinished concrete structures, their sharp edges like silent promises of wealth and change. Children laughed as they chased goats along the narrow paths, their feet kicking up dust that shimmered in the dying light. Vendors called out from the market, their voices weaving into the gentle hum of everyday life. Elders sat beneath the wide canopy of a baobab tree, their eyes observing quietly, the lines on their faces carved by memory and tradition. They knew what the villagers did not yet speak aloud. Beneath the town's calm surface lay stories of pride, resentment, and secrets waiting to unfold. The wind carried whispers of things yet to be revealed, rustling through the leaves as if the earth itself watched and listened. Beyond the market, through a narrow lane shaded by flowering mango trees, lay the family compound. Its walls were thick, built from sun-dried bricks that had seen generations pass. Mud floors creaked underfoot, and carved wooden chairs told tales of ancestors who had gathered here before, weighing justice, love, and duty with silent judgment. Each corner seemed to hold a memory, each doorway a story. The compound was a living testament to hierarchy and respect, where comfort was secondary to reputation. Alliances were whispered, rivalries kept quiet, and every gesture carried meaning. The elders' presence dominated the space, their silent authority palpable in every measured glance. In the center of this quiet kingdom moved the woman who would one day change the balance of power. She was observant, moving like a shadow, listening more than she spoke. Her eyes missed nothing, a shift of the head, a tightening of a jaw, the flicker of envy in a cousin's gaze. She had been raised in the wisdom of her ancestors, taught patience, humility, and foresight. Yet beneath her simple dress and respectful demeanor, she carried knowledge of numbers, of ledgers, and of the world beyond these walls. She was quiet strength made visible only to those who paid attention, and she had learned to navigate every subtle ripple of tension without disturbing the surface. Across the compound, laughter and pride drew attention to another figure. He was the man everyone admired from a distance, the wealthy relative whose charm made people forget caution. His clothes were sharp, his words confident, and his smile disarming. Yet those who looked closer saw the shadow behind his eyes, arrogance and the hunger for control. Where the protagonist moved with caution, he strode with entitlement. Where she measured patience, he measured influence. His pride, like a sword hidden beneath silk, foreshadowed the clashes to come. The evening approached, and the family gathered for the sacred dinner. The table was laid with care, steaming bowls of fufu, platters of roasted chicken, and freshly harvested vegetables. The meal was more than sustenance, it was a stage. Every smile, every nod, every sip of palm wine carried meaning. Elders took their seats first, setting the tone of reverence and authority. Younger family members whispered lightly, testing boundaries. The protagonist settled quietly at her place, her eyes tracing the table, the faces, the unspoken hierarchy. She knew that tonight, as in all nights past, respect and reputation danced together, and that one misstep could unravel generations of carefully kept order. A hush fell as the first blessing was spoken. The air carried the weight of tradition, of expectations, and of quiet anticipation. And beneath it all, the protagonist felt the tension stir, a current waiting to be navigated, a storm that would not announce itself but would demand recognition. In this compound of whispers and walls that held history, the stage was set for a test of patience, wisdom, and hidden power. A low hum of voices filled the family compound, but beneath the chatter, a quiet tension simmered. For years, some women had been whispered about, those who knew too much or had too much, and the elders had tolerated arrogance in men out of fear, habit, or respect for tradition. Tonight, the same walls that had held generations of respect and routine seemed to tremble with a silent threat. Every glance, every movement carried a hidden weight. A sudden flutter of wings drew attention to the courtyard. A lone bird fought against the wind, its feathers ruffled, circling above the compound before vanishing behind the mango trees. The elders exchanged uneasy looks, as if sensing an omen. Even the wind paused, carrying a whisper that patience and tradition would soon face a test, and that hidden strength, long unnoticed, would rise in quiet defiance. As the family gathered around the long wooden table, laughter filled the air, attempting to mask unease. Platters of roasted chicken, steaming fufu, and rich vegetable stews were passed from hand to hand. Children giggled, passing bowls to their elders, and polite banter bounced lightly between cousins. "Eat quickly, or the fufu will grow cold," joked one young man, eliciting a few smiles. But beneath the laughter, the undercurrent of resentment flowed quietly. The male antagonist, ever confident, let his words linger with hidden weight. "Ah, our little star of the house," he said with a grin to the protagonist. "Always reading, always planning. I wonder if you will finish the fufu before it solves all your problems." The word seemed light, playful even, to the untrained ear. Yet those who watched closely saw the mocking curl of his lips, the tiny spark of envy in his eyes. The elders remained silent, their eyes flicking between the two, knowing better than to intervene openly. Around the table, a few family members laughed nervously, while others shifted uneasily, feeling the tension coil like a serpent beneath the surface. The protagonist smiled politely, her hands resting calmly on her lap, sensing the currents of jealousy and ambition swirling around her. She did not speak in anger. She did not flinch. Her mind traced the history of the family, the stories of women who had been pushed aside for daring to hold knowledge or wealth. She understood the unspoken rules and the dangerous edges of the night. This dinner would not end quietly, and patience, as her ancestors had taught her, was a weapon. The antagonist, encouraged by the lack of resistance, continued with another jab, leaning closer with a grin. "And tell me, my dear, will you use all that cleverness to tidy up the house too, or does it only work on ledgers and accounts?" Some cousins laughed at the remark, masking discomfort behind forced smiles. A servant, carrying a tray of wine, paused mid-step, sensing the shift, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Every eye in the room subtly measured the protagonist's response, yet she remained composed, a calm river cutting through the ripples of tension. Outside, the wind shifted again, rustling the leaves of the ancient mango tree, as if echoing the unspoken truth. Tonight, laughter carried hidden teeth, and the stage was set for reckoning, patience, and unseen power to rise. The elders sat in their carved wooden chairs, their faces still, but their eyes sharp. Every movement around the table was recorded silently, every word weighed in the balance of tradition and fear. They saw the subtle humiliations, the veiled jabs, and the mocking glances aimed at the young woman who sat with calm dignity. Yet they said nothing. Their silence was not approval, it was a tangled mixture of respect for wealth, dread of conflict, and the desire to preserve the peace, however fragile. "Do you think she even understands what she is saying?" The male antagonist chuckled loudly, leaning back, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. His grin was sharp, rehearsed, a weapon cloaked in charm. "Our little scholar here might have ideas, but ideas do not fill bowls, or pay the debts of a household." No one intervened. The elders' quiet gaze followed him, their hearts heavy with a moral failure that weighed like stones in the pit of the stomach. Tradition demanded they uphold respect for all, yet modern power, the glitter of wealth, the confidence of influence, demanded obedience. Their hesitation only fed his audacity. Emboldened by the silence, he grew bolder. He slammed his hand against the table, rattling the clay bowls, as if marking territory. "I have spoken with governors, I know bankers personally, and my connections stretch far beyond these walls," he boasted, leaning forward. His laughter rolled across the room, deliberately loud, asserting dominance over every corner. Each gesture was measured to unsettle, to remind the family who truly held power in public eyes. Yet, across from him, she sat unmoved. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, her eyes calm but alert. Memories of her ancestors whispered in her mind. Patience is strength, silence can be louder than shouting, justice comes not from haste but from precision. She scanned the room, noting alliances and glances, observing who might falter and who would remain loyal when the moment of reckoning arrived. Her quiet resolve was a stark contrast to his aggressive energy. Where he thundered, she flowed silently, a river ready to shift the earth when the time was right. Around her, cultural pressures grew heavier. The women at the table shifted slightly, their eyes darting, reminding her of unspoken rules. Endure insult, forgive openly, remain modest in speech. Yet her restraint was both virtue and isolation. Family whispers brushed the air like wind through leaves, subtle but firm, reinforcing hierarchies, reminding all that a woman's patience could be admired or exploited. The room braced, aware that tension was a living thing, coiled and waiting. The antagonist sensed it, yet ignored it, letting his disrespect grow deliberate. He leaned back, tipping the wine slightly, spilling a drop in her direction without apology. His jokes now carried sharper edges, hints of threat threading through laughter. "Careful, little one," he said, voice soft but sharp. "We wouldn't want your cleverness to spill over where it doesn't belong." Some cousins chuckled nervously, others stiffened, unease curling through the compound like smoke. The air itself seemed to tighten, foreshadowing a reckoning that had long been simmering, ready to erupt from patient observation into action. Every gesture, every word, every pause carried weight. The dinner table had shifted from a gathering of kin to a stage of power, control, and silent plotting. And through it all, she remained still, a calm eye in a storm that no one yet understood, waiting for the moment when justice would no longer be patient. The silence at the table was deafening. Every glance that should have met intervention or a word of caution instead slid past the antagonist, who grinned wider with each passing moment. The family's failure to act was not merely avoidance, it was a silent betrayal, a collective condemnation of the protagonist. The weight of their inaction pressed down on the room like the heavy midday sun, turning every breath into tension, every heartbeat into anticipation. The air seemed to thicken, as though the walls themselves held their judgment. Eyes darted nervously to one another, whispers were swallowed before they could escape. Even the children sensed it, freezing mid-bite, aware that something sacred had been violated, though they could not yet name it. The protagonist's calm remained unshaken on the surface, but beneath it, the storm of moral outrage and simmering patience churned. Laughter that had once floated lightly across the table now cracked under the pressure. The antagonist leaned forward with a gleam in his eye, testing limits with cruel precision. "Do you really think your cleverness can save you tonight?" he said, voice dripping with mockery. His hand moved deliberately, seizing a portion of the steaming fufu from a platter and poured it across her lap, the warm mass soaking her dress. Gasps arose, but no one moved. Food, once sacred and communal, now became a weapon. The symbolism was clear to all who understood tradition. To soil the meal was to soil dignity, to twist sustenance into shame. The protagonist looked down for a brief moment, her face calm, as though measuring the depth of insult, the reach of arrogance. She did not flinch, yet the room felt the moral quake of the act. The elders remained frozen, caught between fear, tradition, and respect for wealth. Their silence rang louder than words. The family watched, some with hidden unease, others with quiet complicity. The stillness became almost suffocating, a tangible pressure on every chest. Every second that passed without intervention magnified the injustice. The protagonist's humiliation was made heavier by their inaction, each eye a witness, each silence a judgment against her. Inside, her mind raced, balancing the weight of ancestral teachings against the call for justice. "Patience is power," her grandmother's voice whispered. "Honor is not lost by those who wait, but by those who strike too soon." Yet, the urge to act, to reclaim dignity in the face of blatant disrespect, pulsed through her veins. She understood that any impulsive retaliation might dishonor tradition, yet doing nothing would condone cruelty and empower arrogance. She lifted her gaze, calm and unwavering, eyes locking briefly on the antagonist, not with hatred, but with measured, silent authority. Her breath was steady. Her heart, a drumbeat of restraint and righteous anger. This moment was the crossroads where African tales often find their moral heart, where patience, courage, and justice intersect, and where the quietest soul can wield the greatest power. The elders remained seated, their carved faces still and silent. Each glance toward the protagonist carried a question they could not answer. When does respect end and complicity begin? Their continued quiet became unbearable, like a shadow pressing upon every soul at the table. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, the weight of their moral failure palpable. In that silence, everyone understood that wrongdoing might occur without consequence, that arrogance could thrive unchecked. She felt the pressure, a heavy mantle pressing on her shoulders. Yet her eyes did not waver, nor did her posture bend. She understood deeply that justice must be asserted, no matter how the community hesitated, no matter how the ancestors' teachings demanded patience. Around her, whispers of disapproval and fear hovered, but she remained anchored, a quiet storm contained within human form. Family members exchanged uneasy glances, waiting for a tear, a flinch, a loud protest. They expected her to break under the weight of public humiliation, expecting emotions to spill across the table like the fufu that had already betrayed her dignity. Every eye projected its assumptions. Some predicted submission, others imagined retaliation. The room held the tension of a village on the edge of a monsoon, the stillness before thunder and rain. But she did not break. Not even a tremor betrayed her inner storm. Her stillness was deliberate, cold, and calculated, a silent declaration that strength was not measured by outward fury. The antagonist's grin faltered, a shadow of doubt flickering across his confident posture. The balance had shifted subtly, imperceptibly, yet unmistakably. Her patience was a sword, her quiet resolve a shield, turning humiliation into a moral pivot point. Without a word, she reached within herself, summoning the hidden strengths of a life carefully built in shadow. Her calm eyes masked years of study, preparation, and financial understanding. Every gesture she had made until now, each nod, each measured smile, was part of a strategy no one had noticed. The villagers and family members, accustomed to equating quietness with weakness, began to see the truth. This woman's silence was not frailty, but power in disguise. Slowly, realization spread through the room. The protagonist's knowledge of law, banking, and modern tools, things unseen and unappreciated, became evident in subtle ways. A phone buzzing with alerts, documents quietly handled, connections quietly activated. The antagonist, the man who had believed himself untouchable, stared in disbelief as his carefully constructed dominance began to crumble. The family, the elders, the cousins, all saw that wisdom could hide in humility, that a quiet life did not mean an empty one. In that moment, the tale became clear. Strength is not always loud. True power can wait, can observe, can strike when least expected. And in this household, where arrogance had once ruled, patience and knowledge now claimed the upper hand. The storm was coming, but it was hers to unleash. She moved quietly, her fingers tracing paths she had learned over years, paths through banking systems, legal papers, and financial records. Each keystroke, each document signed, was precise and deliberate, like the careful steps of a hunter tracking prey at dawn. The accounts that had once empowered her arrogant relative now trembled under her touch. "Let this be a lesson," she whispered to herself, eyes calm, yet sharp as a hawk's. "Strength is not in noise, but in preparation." Money, the symbol of his pride and dominance, shifted into an instrument of justice. Wealth, which had once silenced voices and commanded respect, now obeyed a higher moral law. The room, filled with the family and elders, began to feel the first tremors of change. Her quiet hands, guided by foresight and intelligence, had rewritten the rules. Phones buzzed. Alerts flashed. Transactions failed. The antagonist, who had strutted into the compound earlier with a grin as broad as the river, froze. His laughter, so confident moments ago, died in his throat. What is happening?" he stammered, scanning his devices. Whispers spread like wildfire. Eyes darted between screens and papers. The air thickened with shock and disbelief. Elders gasped silently, realizing the foundations of power, money, influence, fear, could crumble in an instant. Chaos unfolded, but no one moved to intervene. All watched, trapped between awe and fear. The antagonist's hands shook. The power he had clung to, the wealth that had made him a king in this family, slipped through his fingers like sand. Authority collapsed, influence vanished, and the silent throne of money, the fragile crown he had worn proudly, crumbled. Elders and cousins, who had once bowed to arrogance, now faced the bitter truth of their complicity. Their silence had allowed tyranny to flourish, but they could not undo the consequences. Eyes that had once dismissed her as meek now widened in recognition. The room felt the weight of unseen strength, respect mingling uneasily with fear. This cannot be," he muttered, his voice low, faltering. How did you?" Her calm gaze met his, unshaken. "Power is not loud. It waits. It observes. And it strikes when wisdom guides it." The frozen accounts were more than numbers. They were a message, a symbolic turning of the tide. Tradition and modernity met in her hands. Ancestral patience blended with contemporary action. This act, quiet but decisive, demonstrated that strategy and foresight could outmatch arrogance and brute confidence. The family, witnessing the invisible hand of justice, understood the moral. Humility is not weakness, and silence can conceal the sharpest blade. Respect shifted, balance restored, and the compound, once a stage of arrogance and submission, became a place where wisdom had spoken louder than wealth. In that moment, the unseen force revealed itself, and the story of pride humbled, patience rewarded, and intelligence victorious became etched in the hearts of all who had watched. The lesson was clear: Justice is patient, and those who underestimate the quiet often fall the hardest. Chaos rippled through the compound like a sudden storm. Walls that had witnessed generations of respect and hierarchy now seemed to shiver under the weight of uproar. Cousins tripped over each other, elders' murmurs rose into anxious whispers, and servants hurried in every direction. The air, thick with tension, sparked like dry grass in a lightning strike. "Look! The accounts! They are frozen!" someone shouted, voice trembling, eyes wide. Panic spread faster than the wind through the village streets. The antagonist, who had entered with a confident smile, flared arms, and booming laughter, suddenly froze. Every gesture of control faltered. Commands that had once been obeyed now met silence. His authority crumbled as swiftly as clay under rain. "What is this? How can this happen?" he stammered, face pale, hands trembling over the table. He tried to stand tall, to reclaim dominance, but the very air seemed to reject him. Family members' eyes pierced him, not with hatred, but with the shock of witnessing justice delivered. Those who had laughed when the protagonist was humiliated now bowed their heads, crawling or kneeling before her in desperate appeal. "Please, forgive us," whispered one cousin, hands trembling. We should have spoken." Murmurs of apology echoed around the compound, a chorus of contrition for the silence that had enabled cruelty. The contrast was stark. Yesterday's laughter had become today's shame. The scene shifted. Where once the protagonist had been mocked and demeaned, she now stood tall, calm, unshaken. Her quiet strength illuminated the room, a beacon of patience and foresight. The antagonist's fall was complete. Status gone, voice silenced, dignity stripped bare. The reversal of power, witnessed by every eye, carried the weight of moral truth. Arrogance could not withstand wisdom and preparedness. Elders, who had lingered in silence through prior humiliation, now bowed their heads in reflection. They felt the sting of their inaction, understanding that their fear and attachment to wealth had allowed wrongdoing to flourish. "We have failed in our duty," murmured the eldest, voice low but heavy with remorse. "Tradition without courage is empty. Respect must not bow to power alone." The compound, once a stage for pride and submission, now reflected balance restored. The moral lesson hung in the air, as palpable as the smoke from the cooking fires outside. Those who humiliate others in public may find themselves humbled. Patience and intelligence, even when quiet, possess a power that arrogance cannot imagine. The family had learned that respect, foresight, and justice are stronger than wealth, noise, or fear. The compound settled into a hushed calm, yet the air was thick with the weight of recent events. No one spoke at first, even the wind seemed to pause, listening. The protagonist remained standing, poised and dignified, her eyes steady and commanding respect without raising her voice. Every movement she made radiated quiet authority, patience, resilience, and the justice that flows from wisdom, not vengeance. "She has changed everything with her silence," whispered one elder, voice trembling as he lowered his head in acknowledgement. Family members shuffled, unsure of how to react. The antagonist sat frozen, shoulders slumped, the fire of arrogance extinguished by unseen hands of fate. He realized, finally, that his wealth, his threats, and his charm could not undo what patience and strategy had accomplished. Karma, subtle yet undeniable, had served its due. The protagonist did not gloat. She set conditions instead of destruction, her calm imposing boundaries and lessons, humility over hubris, foresight over impulsiveness. The family understood without words that her restraint was strength, that true power required neither cruelty nor loud displays. The elders exchanged glances, heavy with regret. "We let fear of wealth blind us," murmured one, "and now we see how fragile pride is when virtue guides the quiet hand." Their silence now carried a different weight, a recognition of moral failure, and a lesson that tradition without justice is empty. The antagonist's eyes lowered. His public shame was complete. He understood that arrogance and disrespect bring consequences, unavoidable and humbling. His previous authority had dissolved, leaving him to reflect on the fragility of power built solely on fear and greed. Family members, once passive observers, now absorbed the lesson. Respect cannot be bought, silence in the face of wrongdoing is betrayal, and patience paired with wisdom can overturn the mightiest of threats. The protagonist's measured actions left an imprint, showing that the culmination of foresight, restraint, and moral courage outshines chaos and intimidation. As the sun began to dip behind the compound's walls, casting long shadows that seemed to bow toward her, the protagonist finally exhaled. The storm had passed, yet nothing was the same. Eyes that once mocked now carried recognition, and whispers that once humiliated now carried awe. The family understood that justice had spoken in the quietest, most enduring way. In the evening stillness, the lesson lingered like the echo of a drum. Respect outweighs wealth, silence in wrongdoing betrays the soul, and true power waits patiently, hidden until the moment arrives to restore balance. Those who humiliate others in public often fall the hardest when fate decides it is time.